Do not support the Antichrist. Part 1. The confusion and misunderstanding about Antichrist is widespread because most people have not understood that Antichrist is a usurper of the throne of Christ, and that this was foreshadowed in the Old Testament story of King David and his usurper son, Absalom. In Acts 1:15-20, the Apostle Peter firmly stated that Judas ought to be replaced. In making his case, he quoted 2 of the Psalms which prophesied of Judas. They are found in verse 20. For it is written in the book of Psalms, "Let his homestead become desolate, may their camp be a desolation, let no one live in their tents." Psalms 69:25. And let there be no one to live in it, and let another take his position of overseer. May his days be few, may another seize his position. Psalms 109:8. Peter understood that someone else was to take the place of the apostle Judas. The others agreed, and so they drew lots, replacing Judas with Matthias. There were many passages in the Psalms where David prophesied about Judas. David was actually writing about Ahithophel, who had betrayed him by joining Absalom's revolt, but those passages were also prophetic about Judas. Ahithophel, David's counselor, was a prophetic type of the apostle Judas. The story of the revolt is found in 2 Samuel 15-18. After Absalom's coronation in Hebron, his supporters marched on Jerusalem. David decided not to fight his son, so he left the city with his main supporters. 2 Samuel 15:30-32 says, "But David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, with his head covered and walking barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads and went up, weeping as they went. When David came to the summit, where God was worshipped, Hushai the architect came to meet him with his coat torn and earth on his head. David left Jerusalem and walked up the ascent of the Mount of Olives. There he worshipped God. That is, he offered a sacrifice on the summit, or head, the place later known as Golgotha, which means place of a skull. See Matthew 27:33. This rendering shows that the verse prophesied about the sacrifice that Jesus was to make when he fulfilled the story of David. It is clear that Jesus Christ was playing the prophetic role of his ancestor, King David, while those who had ordered his death were playing the role of Absalom. The third main character in this story, of course, was Ahithophel, who played the role of the apostle Judas. After David had escaped from Jerusalem, Absalom had to decide whether to pursue him or to let him escape. Ahithophel gave counsel that he should send the army to pursue David, but Hushai, David's secret friend, disagreed and his counsel prevailed. Ahithophel then knew that David would return later, and so we read in 2 Samuel 17:23. When Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and went off home to his own city. He set his house in order and hanged himself. He died and was buried in the tomb of his father. In hanging himself, he set the prophetic pattern for Judas. That is how it came about that the remaining apostles later had to replace Judas. David had written many things about the death of Ahithophel, who had been his friend and counselor. In fact, Ahithophel was also his wife's grandfather. David, in Psalms 55, 12-14, mourned the loss of his friend. Enemies may kill you, but only a friend can betray you. Jesus called Judas friend in Matthew 26:50, and it was also prophesied in Zechariah 13:6. Tradition says that Judas was the childhood friend of Jesus. The pain of betrayal was part of the suffering that Jesus had to undergo along with crucifixion. Surprisingly, Absalom's revolt began in Hebron, where he usurped the throne of David. Judas was from Hebron, so that was place of betrayal, both of David and later of Jesus. All of this shows how the conflict in the New Testament between Jesus Christ and the Jewish leaders was a replay of the story of David, Absalom, and Ahithophel. We cannot truly understand the New Testament without knowing this. Neither can we understand the nature of Antichrist and Antichrists without knowing this. Summarizing, Absalom was the chief Antichrist in the time of David. David was God's anointed one, that is, the Messiah, Hebrew term, or Christ, Greek term. In the New Testament, Caiaphas was the chief Antichrist, fulfilling the same role that Absalom had played earlier. And Judas, who betrayed him, represented all the Antichrists who support Antichrist and thereby betray Christ. Now we can understand what the Apostle John had in mind when he wrote in about the Antichrist in 1 John 2:19. They went out from us, but they did not belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But by going out they made it plain that none of them belongs to us. The betrayers were believers who loved Jesus, but they loved the high priest of Judaism even more. So one cannot support both Antichrist and Jesus Christ at the same time. Some had chosen to remain with the old temple and its system of worship, while others were able to make the clean break and come out in support of Jesus Christ. The same choice yet remains today. Were all the prophecies of Antichrist fulfilled when the chief priests usurped the throne of Jesus in the 1st century? No. When Antichrist usurped the throne of Christ, it caused a problem that yet needed to be resolved in our time. There is still an ongoing dispute between Jews and Christians over the true identity of the Messiah, or Christ. Jews look for another Christ, and many of them believe it is simply the Jewish people as a whole or the state of Israel. In Luke 19:11-27, Jesus Christ told his followers the parable of the 10 pounds. Verse 14 says, "But the citizens of his country hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, 'We do not want this man to rule over us.' The delegation that they spiritually sent to the court of heaven, saying, 'We do not want this man to reign over us,' established a court case that has yet to be resolved. Each side believes it is right. Only God the Father can decide the case. Regarding the parable of the nobleman who went to a distant country to get royal power for himself and then returned, Jesus Christ kept saying in verse 15, "When he returned, having received royal power, he ordered these slaves, to whom he had given the money, to be summoned so that he might find out what they had gained by trading. It really does matter who we support in this age-long dispute. If we do not understand this conflict, we may find ourselves blindly following Absalom, as so many Israelites did. We may find ourselves supporting those who wanted Jesus to be crucified,